You lost both teams? Get a grip on this operation, Heather. That's bored. Green light the asset.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in Bourne. He has to be put down. And you obviously cannot do what has to be done. I am taking operational control. Asset, you have a green light. Repeat, you have a green light on Bourne.
Copy, guys.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm Dave Bourne, and it is July 19th, 2016, and we're coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Into the archives immediately following this show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, and the next day on Stitcher and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And we, of course, are happy to hear from you via phone or via Skype. The phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or via Skype at Nonpartisan Liberty for all one word. You could send a contact request to the username as well as your name and what you want to talk about. And be sure to check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to all of our Facebook pages and other social media, as well as articles, blogs, and many other cool things. So be sure to check that out. So over the weekend, and I'm trying to actually type something while I'm talking when I multitask on the air, which I know I should not do, but I'm going to do it anyway. But over the weekend, there was another targeted shooting of police officers. So, at least in this case, it was in Baton Rouge where the one of the killings took place that they were protesting recently. So when they were protesting in Dallas and the police got shot, they were protesting this killing of Alton Sterling and of Philando Castile, who was killed in Minnesota, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And I guess they had gotten warnings that someone was gonna plan a shooting of the Baton Rouge cops. I don't know if I mentioned that. It happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where Alton Sterling was killed by the same police. However, we'll get to this later. It's not just, of course, the local police that show up on the scene, nor were the police that killed Alton Sterling any of the ones that were killed. And not that I'm saying that any of this is okay, but if that was the plan there to kill cops in Baton Rouge, it would be a lot more understandable if the actual cops the two cops who had killed Alton Sterling were the ones that were killed, especially if they were the only ones that were killed. It would have at least you could kind of justify it. Not that, just because they had murdered Alton Sterling, and that's, of course, debatable, but I think it's pretty clear. But it would have, I think, with the public in general, looked a lot different, and a lot more people may have, I don't know that they would have supported it, but they would have understood it more, or said, look, hey, you killed somebody and the same thing ended up happening to you type thing. But that is not what had happened. The whole thing has turned into a propaganda mess as far as I see it. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff today, including what the facts that the police are giving. And I don't consider them the facts. I don't not consider them the facts. I just consider them, this is what the police say happened. Is that what really happened? Maybe. Maybe it's mostly what really happened. Maybe it's 80% of what happened. When you gotta think about things like, well, you don't have to. I hate when I tell people to do things. You don't have to do anything, but I suggest that anytime that police talk about really anything, especially things where they have a interest, where it's almost everything really, but where the outcome could affect them in a negative way. And again, when you're a cop, that's almost everything really, because when you're arresting people and bringing them to court, and you're not the actual person bringing them to court, but they end up in court, and you're the one who has to show up and testify and do the investigation, you can lie about whatever you want to lie about, and you may have something against that person. You may just want to close the case. You may think they did it. There's so many different things that I think go into that. So, and in general, government media now is just a bunch of shit. It's so obvious. It's so frustrating to listen to the bullshit that they throw out there. And it makes it hard to feel bad for these cops at all, to be honest. And yeah, I know they have families, and the kids, I guess, are you feel bad for the most. I would think that most people feel bad for the kids the most, because they didn't really not really. They didn't have any choice in who their parents were, that their father chose to be a cop. Of course, the wife chose to marry one, and the cop chose to get married and have kids, knowing that, you know, they say their job is so dangerous, but we know that it's not. But when you look at this in perspective of police shootings, I mean, it's like, so police were targeted twice. Now it's like the end of the world. There's a war. They were saying this for years. There's a war on cops, and you would think that 500 cops died in the past month or something, or this has happened in 30 or 40 cities. I mean, that's the way that they're reacting to it. It's really sickening the way they're treating this. It should be looked at in perspective. You look at how many cops there are. You look at how many cops are killed on a yearly basis, along with the fact of how many people are killed by cops that don't have a gun. And the majority don't have guns. Now, of course, there are situations where they're trying to stop a crime. They show up to, say, an armed robbery or something, and the person that's committing the armed robbery shoots at them, and they shoot back and they kill them. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't think police should exist, period. However, based on the way things currently are, which is fucked up, I don't think that's an unjust shooting. I think in that situation, the cop has a right to defend themselves and to shoot back. But if you go and look at all of the police shootings, you'll see so many where I looked at 3 or 4 today, where they say that the cop shot a person who had a knife. There was one where they claimed it was a knife, but then it came out later it was a screwdriver, and he threw a screwdriver at them and they shot him for it. So, to be honest, and I have looked at this stuff, like I've said before, I took kind of like a sample size to kind of look at it. And I've been looking the past couple weeks too, to kind of go through. I mean, there's only so many, there's only so much time in the day, but I see the ones I see the most of, to be honest, is ones where the cops claim that a person has a knife or some kind of other weapon besides a gun, something that you have to be a foot away from them to do something. It's usually a knife. But there's been like drills. They killed some kid over a drill, an 18-year-old kid that weighed about 100 pounds, that was mentally ill. He had a drill. They killed him over it. 3 cops that could have easily restrained this fucking kid. That had actually went to court. They were charged, but I never heard what happened, and I'm sure they got off. They will sometimes get indicted, but when they do, the DA doesn't want to convict them. The judge, of course, doesn't want them to get convicted. He gives instructions to the jury. First of all, the people that get picked for juries are people that are going to be on the side of the police. It's, your chances of getting convicted as a police officer for something like excessive force. Now, if it's something else, like I did a show on criminal cops where I called them, the cops that kill people are criminals too. But I mean, actually, cops that are dealing drugs and involved in actual cartels, being part of drug cartels, they get convicted usually. Now, how many actually get away with it? There may be tons of them that get away with it, and there's a few that get convicted, but you'll see them get convicted, or at least some of them. But when it comes to anything to do with rights violations or excessive force, they usually will not even go be indicted or charged. They might have a grand jury. Well, I guess that would be an indictment, but they'll never, go to trial. There's some that do, and usually the ones that do are found not guilty. So the amount of cops that go to jail, and somebody should do a study on this. I bet Radley Balco probably has, and it's probably like 1 in a million, literally, at least from what I've seen. But what I see most is them saying that, they had a knife. So the guy with the screwdriver, and I posted this on my Facebook, one of my Facebook pages, and the government police. So you can just search for that on Facebook. And I think I posted it on our show page, Nonpartisan Liberty for All, as well. And they said, I guess the call was about he pulled a knife on his neighbor and threatened him. He threatened his neighbor with like a fold-out knife, like a pocket knife. And he ended up throwing it at the police. But it wasn't a knife. It was a screwdriver. But they claim that they told him to drop it a bunch of times and he wouldn't drop it. How do we know that that's what happened? And how do we know that he even had a knife ever? He could have threatened the neighbor with a screwdriver as well. That's the whole thing, is you don't know. And if you're somebody who just takes the police's word or the government media's word because they just get it from the police, then you're just going to believe all the bullshit that they say and just assume that, oh yeah, they're in the right. Which I don't believe they're in the right even if he had a knife. But, a screwdriver. So you get a screwdriver thrown at you. And then you, I guess the guy on the job in that case that had shot him, because there were multiple cops there, was only on the job for a few months, if I remember correctly. So not that should make any difference with all their training. And speaking of training, I mean, that's what they talk about, and we'll go into this in more detail, like their solutions. I don't hear solutions that have to do with police's power getting taken away. I don't hear any solutions with getting rid of police. Oh, we need police. No, we don't. See, people don't think abstract. They don't think outside the box. You don't come to the conclusion that we need police because of this. Because you need police for a reason. If you're saying you need police, you go to the reason and then go backwards. So if you need police because why? And it's people need to be protected from criminals. They need to be kept safe. Well, does that necessarily have to be the police that does that? And no, it doesn't. And that's a problem, that people grow up a certain way and it's ingrained into their fucking heads that, well, you need police because without police, everything would be crazy. Because, of course, there's no other replacement besides police. Instead of looking at what's needed and looking at society from a standpoint of, well, we need this. and looking at the item that's needed, they're doing the opposite and going backwards and saying we need police. And again, police don't do really what they're needed for any fucking way. Really, police are there for revenge, in a sense, and to collect money. Because they're there for revenge in the sense that they go and arrest the person who did something. And if they did something to you, well, of course, you have all these laws that are victimless crimes. So that's, I don't know what you would fucking call that, because obviously that's not revenge on anybody personally. The state, I guess, well, I would say that they're there for control as well and to keep people in line. And of course, they're not supposed to be there for that reason neither. But what you do is, as you look at it from a standpoint of what do we need police for? And there's all these other things that can be done. I mean, fuck, legalizing drugs, of course, and you eliminate so much crime right there. We'll get to that. And I kind of got a little flustered there because I was, right when I had started the show, I was reading something else and responding to something. So I apologize for that. But so let me get into just the facts stated by the police of this case. So we talked about Dallas, and 5 cops were killed in Dallas. 3 cops were killed in Baton Rouge. So that's 8 police officers. I'm not saying that that's nothing. That's 8 lives. But still, if you have 8 more police officers killed this year than another year, and who knows that will even be the case. I mean, we'll have to see what happens by the end of the year. Like you had the shootings here in Las Vegas, and then you didn't have any. I mean, you had others, but you didn't have anybody target police for the rest of the year. You had the same thing in New York as well, when you had someone that targeted police. Police are rarely targeted. Most police die in the situations that I had said when they're, actually, most police die in other things. More police die in car accidents and other things than people actually trying to kill them. But most of them, people aren't targeting police to kill them. It just happens in the course of arriving on the scene of a crime. Which that's why not a lot of police get killed, because they're never fucking there when a crime's taking place. So the shooter, according to the police, even though through the whole day they were looking for other shooters, they took 2 other people into custody. I didn't even hear what happened with them. I assume they released them. Supposedly someone called based on the see something, say something, there were a couple of men that changed their clothes either into all black or from all black, and I believe they said that they had a rifle, but that could have been just a report. And they had towed their car. They took them into custody. It doesn't sound like a lot of information or any real probable cause to take anybody into custody. But they were fucking out of control, and we'll get into that too. The stuff that the Baton Rouge police, the FBI, and whoever else was there, the state police, were doing was totally fucking out of control. And this is what's happening when they're looking for somebody or they're investigating a crime that they deem as important. Your rights don't exist anymore. And we'll get into the specifics on that. But anyway, they report the lone shooter as Gavin Long, former military, 29 years old. I actually have a clip from YouTube because they had showed it on the news. He was from Kansas City, Missouri, so obviously he drove there for the purpose of shooting those cops. And he, as I said, he is currently the lone shooter, and there was nobody else that knew beforehand that they're aware of at this time. Now, that may change, but at least as of this time, there are no other suspects or no one else that's aware of what went on. They said the weapons he had on him is an SAR, I forget the brand. It's 5.56 rounds, just like an AR-15, Stag Arms AR-15 type gun, but I think that was in the car. And he had a Springfield XD 9mm. They had showed the pictures of all the guns in the press conference. I don't know that this was the case in this shooting, but in the Dallas shooting, I didn't mention this, but I think this was the case. And this happens a lot, that not all the injured were injured by gunshots. I believe in this case they were, but in Dallas, I don't believe that everyone was. Just like when they have the quote-unquote mass shootings and they give an injured count, a lot of those that are injured because you have a whole big group of people trying to get away at the same time. They trip over stuff or trip over people or those type of injuries. But they make you think that they're gunshots because they just lump them all together, and I love how they do that. That's just an example. It's a very small example, but it's an example of how things are distorted by fucking government media. And it's getting so ridiculous. And I hope that the majority of people do not believe this shit. I really do. And I'm not saying what happened in this story. From what I saw, and I didn't look at any, I listened to one guy who was talking about something with numbers. It was fucking out there, and I turned it off. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't see anything in this or the Dallas shooting at this point that makes me think there was some kind of conspiracy or something like that. It is strange that they're lone shooters, and usually that isn't the case. Well, that's not true. I'm just thinking of mass shootings in general, but there's been shootings with lone shooters, but it just, the one in Dallas, there were just so many hits by one guy. I mean, this, I think 3 people were killed and 3 people were injured. I don't know how many people were hit, but it makes sense that one person could do that damage. In the Dallas shooting, it is a lot of hits. And in the Orlando one, there's something fishy about that. And like I said, it could just be that the police, when they came in there, they accidentally shot a bunch of people, or they purposely shot a bunch of people. I don't know, but I don't totally believe what happened there. I mean, this is not, I'm not doubting their narrative as to what happened so much as the way, the spin that the media has put on what's going on is what, and we'll get to that. And it's not that it's, straight up lies, I guess, but they're putting this big spin on it, and it's just ridiculous. So when I'm saying I hope people don't believe this bullshit, I'm not talking about that there was one shooter and he was former military and this is the guy that did it. And, who knows? I don't have a reason to think that that's not what happened. And as I had mentioned, they were on alert. Obviously, I mean, if people are protesting the shooting, you had the shooting in Dallas, I mean, that's just common sense that there might be someone who is a copycat who gets that idea and actually goes down to the place where it happened. Now, I'm not saying this would have been okay, but it would have been a lot better if the guy, Gavin Long, who was the shooter, went and actually found the two officers who did the shooting. And now I know they're suspended with pay, but that's just procedure. Found their addresses or something and went and fucking shot them. But maybe they're, out of town. If you're going to shoot somebody, I'm not saying he should have done that neither. My point is just, I think that more people could actually relate to that and say, well, it's kind of fucked up, but hey, this guy went after the guys who killed this other guy. And you can look at that in a kind of a different light than just shooting at officers that you don't know anything about them, and just randomly, yes, they're part of the same gang. And I've mentioned this before. Hey, if you join a gang, things are going to happen. So, and there's, I'm sure, a lot of good people in gangs and a lot of good people that were in the mafia that were nice guys too. And they ended up getting killed. Did anybody give a fuck? No. Of course, when it comes to police, they care more about police than they seem to care about anybody. And that's a lot of the media bullshit, is when police kill somebody, you don't have any of this stuff. But when somebody kills a cop, it's, it's like the end of the world. So anyway, the police may have fired first. Now, they're not going to admit that, and I did not hear that from in the press conference, and they showed kind of a little map there of where he was, where they were, and I don't recall anything about, them saying that they fired first, because obviously that's, even if they did, they're not going to say that. So he started firing at them. They exchanged gunfire. He, to basically sum it up, as I said, he killed 3 people, injured 3. The state police showed up, and they ended up killing him. They actually called in the Bearcat on the radio. They had played the call, an officer down call, and I'm thinking of this Bearcat and what the I mean, because the other thing they did after was they used this as an excuse to be to the militarization of the police. That's why I'm saying I would put this in perspective and not just look at it as, this does not happen all the time. This rarely happens. Yes, it did happen within 2 weeks. The Dallas shooting was I believe it was, I'm looking at the calendar, I think it was the 7th, and this was the 17th. So yes, it was within 10 days, but stuff like that rarely happens, if at all. And that's another thing that people don't realize. They think police's jobs are so dangerous and they're getting killed all the time, and that's just not the reality. So it's like saying, well, we need to have a bazooka because, I don't know, China might shoot a missile at us. I mean, I don't know, a bad analogy, but the point being is that this never happens. The other thing is, what does the Bearcat even fucking do anyway? Because unless you're riding around in it all the time, it's not really going to do much. Because by the time you get the Bearcat and you get it out and you get it to the scene, I mean, the guy's probably dead. The only reason he wasn't in the Dallas shooting was because they were, not charging in there because prospective bombs and things like that. So I guess you could say, well, if they have a Bearcat, and they run over a mine or something, which I seriously doubt that that's going to happen. It's just, it's overkill. It really is. So you had a sniper, or you had two snipers. It is not something that, the chances of your police department of that happening are slim to none. And almost every police department in the country has a Bearcat, along with automatic weapons and all of these things. So they used it as an excuse, of course, or a reason why they're militarized. But when they got militarized in the first place, they really didn't have any reasons. They just did it. So it doesn't really matter. They can use this and say, hey, we need to get more militarized, and they did after the Dallas shooting. But it doesn't matter whether they have a reason or not, because they're pretty much going to do that. And they did it in the first place. It's not like they had a reason and that's why they did it. They did it because the federal government was giving out, had all this extra equipment, or whether it was older equipment, or I think most of it was brand new. Really, they had probably contracts with all these arms fucking dealers, essentially, which are, American corporations that they have deals with, the government has contracts with. And maybe they had in the contract, they had to meet a quota or whatever. And I think at the same time, they want to militarize the police because they know what they're planning on doing. And they're planning on taking away more rights and more freedoms. And that's what this whole fucking thing is about. And we'll get to that in more detail. This is not about fucking racism and Black Lives Matter versus the police. And that's where the media bullshit is really coming into this. And that's where I hope people don't buy into the bullshit. Because that's not what this is about. This is about having any type of freedom, not having the police being able to do whatever they want and violate your rights anytime they want. And pretty much that's where they're at this point anyway, for the most part, because the courts will back them up. They'll sign off on any warrant. They rubber stamp it. It's getting to the point where there is no freedom at all. Now, there's not, for a while there hasn't been much, but it's going to get worse. And what the media is doing, along with Black Lives Matter, is taking, and this is, I said this when I talked about Dallas, is taking the focus away from the real issue, taking the focus away from the whole point that the police are at the bottom. They're the dogs of the government. They're their attack dogs. They're really they're little slaves, but they don't even realize it. And they're the ones that enforce everything. Without them, the politicians are screwed, at least on a state level. Now, they still have the military, but the military is a lot different, it seems, attitude-wise, where a lot of people in the military would not do some of the things that the police would do. But it seems like they're looking for more people in the military that would, and trying to train them in that vein. And, you know, they had Jade Helm over the summer, and who knows what that was really getting into with special forces and those type of things, and whether it was more for things happening here in the U.S., which I believe it is. So, I mean, this isn't a fucking conspiracy. You just look at the laws that are being passed. You just look at the amount of freedom you had, 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And I'm not saying that even the country was free when it started in the first place, because it wasn't. But they started at a certain point, and from day one, they took away more. It started taking away freedoms, and it went on, and nobody did anything about it. And we're at where we're at now, and we're in a fucked up position. We're in a bad position, and some people feel that the answer to that is to go out and do something crazy like this. Of course, I totally disagree with them. That is not going to solve the problem. Now, I don't think the problem's going to be solved through the system neither, but it's not going to be solved by randomly shooting fucking cops, which is crazy. However, I understand the frustration. I understand where these people are coming from, assuming that they're not just nutcases. And Gavin Long didn't sound like a nutcase. The other guy, I don't know. I haven't heard any videos from him or anything like that. I mean, he could have been mentally ill for all I know. But people are frustrated, and he actually killed a black cop as well. So I don't know for him if it was more about the police than it was about a black thing. So when I look at it, I don't really know what his mind state was, but from seeing that video, you can tell that this was a guy that was frustrated and didn't like what was going on, and unfortunately, he chose the wrong way to deal with his issues, or I won't say his issues, but his issues with the police or with the government or whatnot. But I understand the frustration and where people are coming from. So I'm going to take a quick break. I have a whole bunch of clips to play. And when we come back, I got a lot to talk about regarding the media, how they are distorting this whole thing and how they are covering it, what they did in Baton Rouge and how they violated people's rights, totally violated people's rights. in this investigation. And it's like, if there's an investigation that they're doing that they feel is important, they will just trample all over your rights. It's like, it reminded me of what happened in the Boston bombing. It really did, when I heard all of these things that they were doing. So we'll be right back after this. Again, if you'd like to call in, 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or Nonpartisan Liberty for All on Skype. Or you can just go to Nonpartisan Liberty for All, and all that information will be there. So we'll be right back after this. NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com.
Our breaking news tonight, 3 officers dead, 3 wounded in Baton Rouge. A really tough day for Baton Rouge and for the country, really. Here to talk about how to keep our police safe is Sheriff David Clark of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. He is going to be speaking at the Republican convention tomorrow night. Sheriff, thank you very much for that horrific day. I spoke to the heads of the sheriff department, the police department, and the state police down there, and they told us how their hearts were reeling. Their message is peace and coming together in the country. What's your message?
You don't believe that for 1 minute, do you?
That their message is?
Yeah.
That's what they said to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe them. Of course
Any
I believe them
protests
when they say
over the
that.
deaths of these cops today in Baton Rouge?
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Any riots or protests over the police officers in Dallas, Texas?
What are you asking?
It's a pretty simple question.
I asked you what's your message to the people. Their message is one of peace. What is your message?
My message has been clear from day one 2 years ago. This anti-cop sentiment from this hateful ideology called Black Lives Matter has fueled this rage against the American police officer. I predicted this 2 years ago. So what I want to know,
sure? Okay, Sheriff.
Do I want to know?
With all due respect, do you know that this was because of that? Do we
Yes,
know
I
that
do.
As a law enforcement officer?
I've been watching this for 2 years. I predicted this. This anti-police rhetoric sweeping the country has turned out some hateful things inside of people that are now playing themselves out on the American police officer. I want to know, with all of the black-on-black violence in the United States of America, by the way, when the tragedies happened in Louisiana and Minnesota, you know that 21 black people were murdered across the United States? Was there any reporting on that?
There was a black officer who was killed today. But
was there any reporting on that?
Sheriff, please, let's just keep the volume down here. So I understand, and listen, I'm
looking at 3 dead cops this week,
Sheriff,
and I'm looking at 5 last year. You trying to tell me to keep it down?
Just please, if you'll just please, we can keep it civil. So, because the message to people at home, I'm sure you want, is one of civility.
I wish, Don, I wish you had that message of civility
to have a conversation
toward this
with you.
hateful ideology, these purveyors of hate.
You don't know what my message is.
That's
what I
what
want
they
to say
do.
to you is,
these people preach vile and virtue
we'll be right
in the
back.
name
We're
of
going to go to break,
hate.
and we'll be right back. Are you going to let me talk between your feet? Back now live with Sheriff David Clark of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, and we're here live in Cleveland. You're set to speak tomorrow night, and again, all I want to do is have a conversation. I can't have a conversation with you if we're both talking at the same time. What it sounds like to me is that you're accusing me of violence and supporting a narrative that I'm not necessarily in support of. And if that's what you're accusing me of violence, then you can leave. That's not true. I don't support violence of any type against police officers, against anyone. So if you're accusing me of that, then you're welcome to leave. But if you want to have a conversation, I am more than willing to welcome a conversation with you. I don't disagree with you about there is a narrative across the country that could be harming police officers. But we don't know right now, as someone who's in law enforcement, if that was the actual cause of it. Go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Do we know that generally the American law enforcement officers are racist? Do we know this?
Go on.
I ask a question.
Do I know American general law enforcement are racist? I don't think anyone is accusing. If you're insinuating that people are accusing or saying that law enforcement across this country as a whole are racist, then your assumption is wrong.
First of all, this whole anti-police rhetoric is based on a lie. There is no data, and you know this. There is no data, there is no research that proves any of that nonsense. None. Even
You'd have to be more specific about what data and what nonsense you're talking about.
that law enforcement officers treat black males different than white males in policing in these urban centers.
There is data that supports
There is not data.
No, the president spoke about it. Cedric Alexander, who
The
is a law
president has
enforcement
been
officer,
lying about it. He said it again the other day when he said black males are 2 times more likely to be shot by a law enforcement officer than white males. Don, that is a lie.
That is not a lie.
It is a lie.
Yes,
Show me.
The research.
Show me.
The research
Show
that
it to me then.
we have from the Washington Post. That
The Washington
facilitated
Post
study.
debunked
There's
that
also
nonsense.
There's also research.
He also said this
Sheriff,
time.
There's also research.
He
from
continues.
A Harvard professor that also showed that black people are treated more aggressively by police officers.
No, you are
than other people.
wrong in your interpretation of that Harvard study because I read the study. That's not what he said. He said he was surprised to find
that in shootings of the most severe in shootings that he found no evidence that there was a difference. Also, it should be noted that that study was a very small sampling of police departments across the country. Many people did not find it credible, but it is also interesting that in that research he found that blacks were treated differently when it came to aggressive policing, but for the most egregious shootings, he found no difference. That's what that study showed.
Well, based on what? Just generally? Are we talking about high crime areas? Are we talking about police officers being under attack? Because let's go back to where this whole thing started in Ferguson, Missouri. The lie was hands up, don't shoot.
Lumping a whole bunch of things into one. If we can do one specific
That's
thing
where
and
this
stick to
whole
it,
phony movement
we'll get to
started.
it.
It started out as hands up, don't shoot.
You're talking about Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Okay. So if you want to, you would need to speak to someone who is a member of Black Lives Matter about whether they have perpetrated a fraud on the American people. That's up to Black Lives Matter. That's not me. I'm neither a member of Black Lives Matter, I'm neither a supporter or someone who doesn't support them. I simply report on Black Lives Matter.
Do you condemn the anti-police rhetoric coming from this hateful ideology?
As a journalist sitting here on television, I don't have to condemn anyone, anything. That is something that you should ask other people around the country.
I condemn
their jobs to condemn
just
that.
like I condemn the hateful ideology out of groups like the KKK. All right? I condemn it. There is no place in American discourse for that sort of vile, vitriolic hate coming out of this ideology. This has fueled and fanned the flames of this anger toward the American police officer. There's only one group in America, one time, that truly cares about the lives of black people in these urban ghettos. And it's the American police officer who goes down there on a daily basis, puts their life on the line to protect who? Black people. So when you say we just want to have a conversation, let's have a conversation about the black-on-black crime, which kills more black males, which is more of a threat to any black male in the United States than a law enforcement officer.
Sheriff, yes, that's a different conversation. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. There's an issue when it comes to violence. Black-on-black crime, or it's crime. White people kill white people, tend to kill white people. Black people tend to kill black people.
Not in the numbers.
That's fine, but that's a different conversation.
I don't care who white people are killing.
That is a different conversation than police brutality, and we're not having that conversation right now. And again, I want to be very clear with you. I condemn all violence of any type, just for the record.
Was the situation between Mike Brown and Darren Wilson, was that police brutality?
But we're not talking about Mike Brown and Darren Wilson.
I am.
No, if you're asking me what the Justice Department showed, the Justice Department showed that it exonerated Officer Darren Wilson, and that the hands up, don't shoot narrative was a false narrative. That has been reported by CNN and by others.
That was another phony report.
What does that have to do with Baton Rouge, Louisiana?
All right, because when you take in rates of involvement in violent crime, and crime in general, but violent crime, you're going to see that black males are overrepresented. Overrepresented in terms of being involved in violent crime. That's going to mean more arrests. That's going to mean more people going to prison. This stuff has already been debunked.
Sheriff, that's a different conversation.
Every
one that
time,
many people
every
don't,
time
and one that
you
many,
don't have a response to something I say, you say
it's not that I don't have a response to you. Is that we're having two different conversations. I'm talking about. I'm asking the questions here. You're answering the questions by asking questions about some other subject that we're not discussing.
We're talking about this
conversation.
hateful ideology called Black Lives Matter. You said you're not a member. You can't be a member. It's not an organization. There's no structure.
That's what you're talking about. Listen, I understand, and
it is a hateful
that you're very. I understand it's a very stressful time for you.
These individuals.
And Sheriff, we appreciate you coming on.
They preach vile and vitriol in the name of virtue.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff. We appreciate it. We understand it's a very tough time for you. We'll be right back.
I want to bring in now Steve Loomis, detective with the Cleveland Police Department and the president of the Cleveland Police Patrolmen's Association. And Steve, before we get to you, I want to kind of set the scene here. We're in Cleveland for the Republican National Convention, and it has been your task to make sure that people coming here at this venue and all throughout the city are safe. So I first want to get your thoughts on what's happening in Baton Rouge and then how it might affect here. You're with us?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, yes, ma'am. Absolutely heart-wrenching watching what's going on in Baton Rouge right now and the reasonings behind it. You know, this all began, the Dallas police officers being ambushed and murdered. Now in Baton Rouge, it looks like that's the same thing. This all began with a 911 call from an African-American male saying that another African-American male was pointing a gun at him. Those officers responded. That male didn't comply and tragically ended up losing his life over that with a gun in his pocket. This is how this began. The President of the United States validated false narrative and the nonsense that Black Lives Matter and the media are pressing out there to the public, validated it with his very divisive statements, and now we see an escalation. This has got to end. We need some leadership in this country to come forward and put an end to this. I don't care if it's clergy, I don't care who it is, but somebody's got to step up and put an end to this because it's the false narrative and very influential people that are politicizing the false narrative. Absolutely insane that we have a president of the United States and a governor of Minnesota making the statements that they made less than one day after those police-involved shootings. And those police-involved shootings, make no mistake, are what absolutely has triggered this rash of senseless murders of law enforcement officers across this country. It is reprehensible. And the President of the United States has blood on his hands and it will not be able to come washed off.
You know, I hear the emotion in your voice. We heard it from the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, right after what happened there with 5 police officers killed in Dallas just a few days ago. And now we have this situation. I want you to talk about the fact that here in Cleveland, Officer Loomis, we have hundreds of police officers coming from all over. Does this change this venue in any way? And I want to be careful about the language that we use and not take this to an even more incendiary level, but it is what it is. You have a lot of police officers coming here.
We have a lot of police officers.
And they are targets.
Absolutely, they're targets, and this is proof positive that they're targets. Our legal staff right now is drafting a letter to Governor Kasich. We are asking for him to take emergency action to ban any weapons, open carry weapons, in Cuyahoga County for the next week, because anybody that's going to have an open carry weapon is going to be treated and looked at in a hostile type environment. In this environment where police officers are being ambushed and murdered, anybody that has an open carry gun, we are going to look at, and we are going to look at very, very hard. And Governor Kasich needs to step up and seize the moment and take care of this issue with some type of order or whatever he needs to do to outlaw or ban open carry weapons here. I don't know what the details in Baton Rouge are, but I can tell you and assure you that anybody having a weapon on their arm or a weapon slung over their shoulder is going to be looked at in a much, much different light than we would normally look at, given the circumstances and what this country's going through. How the hell did we ever become the bad guys in this country? I cannot imagine how we got there. It's the irresponsible reporting of the media, and it's the irresponsible statements of people that are credible, like the President of the United States, like celebrities. If you're blessed with celebrity and you're blessed with talent, then use that celebrity for good and not evil. And what do we do? We have actors out there spewing venom. We have singer-songwriters spewing venom. We have athletes up here in Cleveland. We had an athlete that did something, that he since has apologized for, so I don't want to go down that road with him. But use your power. We have to come together on this. Every corner of this country needs to come together.
It's interesting because this then begins to step into the ground of politics when you talk about the Second Amendment rights and banning open carry in a state where it is the law, even if it's for a particular time of a period of time throughout this. So that will be at that level. About the governor, that will be a political and a public safety issue to kind of toggle back and forth with. And what you're asking is that they actually begin that dance and begin to talk about it. Before I let you go, I want to talk about securing a venue knowing that police are targets, and not just any venue, but it's our democracy on display for the world. We are blessed to have police officers come and give their time and energy and expertise to keep all of us safe here. It looks much like a military installation right now. I mean, I saw the fortification even before this happened as I arrived at the venues this morning in downtown Cleveland. You're from here, you police here, your challenge now going forward.
Well, that is a challenge going forward. History has shown us that we have to fortify the city if we don't want it to be trashed by a bunch of people that have no business being here, breaking our stuff and throwing rocks at us, and now murdering us. History has shown the policies and the procedures that we're employing here in Cleveland and probably in Philadelphia next week are written in the blood of our brothers and sisters, are written in lessons learned historically at these RNCs and these DNCs. And this is an absolute tragedy that this is the state of affairs in the United States of America, where the police officers are the enemies, and they're the enemies again because a four-time convicted felon who's got a gun in his pocket didn't comply with the police officers in Baton Rouge. And the President of the United States had very divisive words to say about that. And it is an absolute travesty, and I can't imagine a worst-case scenario for men and women. I'm going to have 600 Cleveland police officers out here at the RNC. We're going to have another 2,300 officers that are coming in from all over the country to help us with this. This is a great country. This is the only place in the world where you can come and you can say what it is that you want to say. And we defend the Second Amendment, and we defend the Constitution and the rights of people to be able to freely say whatever it is that they want to say. And let me tell you something. The new Black Panther Party and the Black Lives Matter movement that were down protesting in front of the 3rd District here in Cleveland last night, they weren't saying very nice things. And they were saying things that were insightful, and they were saying things that were very threatening about what they want to do to police officers and taking over the district and everything else. So I don't want to hear this peaceful protest nonsense either. There's nothing peaceful about that. You cannot, in this country, go into a theater. You can't go into a theater and scream fire.
Alpha Team report.
What's happening, Heather?
Alpha Team isn't responding.
Bravo?
Still nothing.
You lost both teams? Get a grip on this operation, Heather. That's bored. Green light the asset.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in Bourne. He has to be put down, and you obviously cannot do what has to be done. I am taking operational control. Asset, you have a green light. Repeat, you have a green light on Bourne.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All, and we are back. In that first clip, if you had listened to that, and that's the sheriff of Milwaukee, who's also black, but he had said something, about Black Lives Matter and how he knew for years this is what was going to happen and all this bullshit. Now, obviously, he forgets very quickly about what happened in Las Vegas and what's been going on before Black Lives Matter, where supposedly it was all of these anti-government people that were against the police, and that's what the Southern Poverty Law Center was training police on, and all of this shit. So to talk about the fact that this is all about, Black Lives Matter, and that's why this is going on and all of this shit. It's like, has this motherfucker ever heard of Cop Block or any of these other groups? And I'm when I say that, I'm not blaming Cop Block or any of the police accountability groups. What I'm saying is they've been watching police for years now and been reporting on police. And if anybody's responsible, it's the police themselves. It's like, because he had said, oh, it's Black Lives Matter in the media and them causing all of this shit. And it's like, no, what it is it's the police and all the shit that they've been doing for years. This didn't all of a sudden fucking start with Black Lives Matter, who's been around for what, like a year and a half or something? This has been going on for a long time, and people have been reporting on it for a long time. Now, I mean, it's probably been going on since the beginning of policing, but I mean, as far as a buildup and a reporting on all the stuff the police are doing and the backlash towards the police, I mean, that's been going on for years before Black Lives Matter. And Cop Block has been reporting on all the stuff that the police were doing. Not that Cop Block was doing anything wrong, or Peaceful Streets, I think, was another group, and Cop Watch, and all of these police accountability groups that have been reporting on the police, and people finding out about all the fucked up shit that the police have been doing. None of that's being mentioned. He's just talking about Black Lives Matter, and that's why. And no, that's not, and he tries to act like, oh, well, I said that 2 years ago and whatever. And that's what I think is scary, in the sense that people are forgetting about the real issue. It's like, I guess in a way it's good for Cop Block and the police accountability groups that no one's going after them. So it's good in that sense, but it's not good in the sense that they're not being talked about as far as the reporting on what's going on. Because with them, it wasn't about race for the most part. Yes, black people are more, as I've said before, it's a higher percentage of black people that are harassed by the police and killed by the police, and whatever happens in police encounters that are negative happen at a higher rate. But the real issue here is the police going after people's freedoms and violating their freedoms. And you see fucks like him as well, that he's even complicit in blaming it on Black Lives Matter too. So he's part of that same bullshit that the media is part of. They're all blaming it on Black Lives Matter and turning it into a black against the police thing. And the one guy from Cleveland, of course, said, oh, there's no, the protesters aren't peaceful and whatever. Just because you run into some protesters that aren't doesn't mean that there's not protesters that are. And not all protesters are part of Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter is a relatively new group, and he's right in one sense. I mean, that it's them in the media, but not them in the media that are distorting what's happening as far as, they're kind of distorting it where they're leaving a bunch of shit out, but they're not the ones that are doing all these things. They're just not reporting on enough of them. It's the police that are, people aren't making up stuff about the police. That's what they're fucking doing. And then they get mad when the people try to hold them accountable. And I'm not talking about, holding them accountable by shooting them. I'm just talking about the protests and those things and all of that. But he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about because, again, you look at the shootings in Las Vegas that happened in 2014. And that was in response to what they were calling or not in response to, but that's groups that they were calling anti-government groups that were fighting against an oppressive government in their minds, although I think they were lunatics, and I've said that before. But they that whole message, not to do what they did, but that the police are violating people's rights and being oppressive and all of that, they were correct, I believe, in that. But if you look at how things are, so back then, what they did, they didn't cover when people got killed by police, period. The first one they covered, I mentioned this, was the one in Missouri, Michael Brown. And then they covered a few others, Eric Garner and the 12-year-old that was killed who had the toy gun. And they've maybe covered about 5 or 6 out of, who knows how many during that time. Probably, if you look at the time period, that's about at least 1.5 years, I think, that has gone by, if not 2 years, which is probably close to 3,000 people that were killed by police. Now, again, a lot of those people, not a lot, but a percentage of those people, I would say it is justifiable when somebody's shooting at you. But there are plenty that were not justifiable. And those were the only ones they reported on. So again, I talked about this with the Dallas shootings. What they're trying to do is make this totally about race and Black Lives Matter and the police. And everything that was going on prior to that, it's like it didn't happen. So the police oppressing everybody in general, the police abusing their power, the police violating people's rights, the police killing anybody, or killing all types of people. All of those things. And when they were talking about when the police got killed in Las Vegas, about anti-government groups and all that, which was a bunch of bullshit as far as that groups that are anti-government are going to go and kill police, because obviously you had those two lunatics, and that was pretty much it until what happened in New York, which was the last three shootings that were targeted shootings were by black people and were part of this whole thing since Ferguson. So essentially, they changed the narrative to fit into what they wanted to fit into. And I've talked about why. I mean, it has to do with, one, I mean, really you're looking at the issue just being racism, just being about black people, and, oh, if we can resolve the issue and come together and cops not be more understanding of race and more conscious, whatever, that whole thing, then everything will be fine. And bringing in cameras and, you know, a couple other things, and then everything's great. And they totally are able to ignore the real threat out there when it comes to the police. The threat to everybody, the threat to everyone except, you know, the 1% or the important people, that the police, and of course the government, are the ones directing the police, whether it's at a local level or state level or federal level, which is why they want to federalize the police, so then they have their own federal army. But is about taking away people's rights, having more control over their lives, passing more laws, and having the police enforce more laws. But that's not being talked about. And at first, they didn't want to talk about police, people getting killed by police at all. But they couldn't ignore it because it went viral. You had riots. You had all this stuff going on. So the government media couldn't ignore it in Ferguson. They couldn't. And then there were other ones that had happened, other shootings by the police that had happened that they couldn't ignore neither. Most of them were on camera, so that, I mean, and they went viral, and the videos went viral, and they couldn't ignore those neither. And there were protests about those. So they said, okay, we can't ignore these, but we can control the narrative as to what's going on. And that's what they've been doing. So, as I mentioned before, I mean, there's around 4 people a day killed by police, all races. And it's really, they're talking about Obama, and even in that interview about people coming together, and we need to come together. And as far as I'm concerned, yeah, we the people who are not police and not part of government need to come together against the government and against the police and stand up to them. And I'm not talking about doing the type of things that they did in Dallas and in Baton Rouge. I'm just talking about, instead of letting the media make this about the police versus black people, make it about what it really is. The government is trying to oppress all of us. And of course, who does the oppressing on the front lines is the police. And some people, they end up killing. So they're pushing this fucking narrative, and, you know, I'm sure some people buy into it. I hope most people don't. I know the ratings for all the news shows are down, and not a lot of people watch. I mean, there's so much to watch now, and not a lot of people watch regular TV. They watch movies or watch, you know, Netflix or something like that. Or like I watch a lot of documentaries. There's YouTube. Some people don't watch TV, period. But there's more and more people that are looking into independent media as well. So that's where Black Lives Matter, at least the leaders and the members, I guess, and I'm not talking about the average person that goes to a protest that's protesting the police and the police killing people, because there's plenty of people and peaceful people that will go to those protests that, one, it doesn't mean that they support Black Lives Matter or they're a member or whatever. But you have Black Lives Matter is obviously being funded by somebody, and it's been infiltrated by the progressive, the Democratic Party or progressive operatives of the Democratic Party or whatever. And between them and government media, they were able to do this. And what I mean is they're able to create this fucking narrative that's a bunch of bullshit. And I'm not saying that there's no racism and there's no oppression from the government based on race when it comes to courts and things like that, because I believe there is. But it goes way beyond that. And everybody at this point is being oppressed by the government in some fashion if they're dealing when they deal with the police. And it's, yeah, black people are targeted more. I've said that a million times, but the whole what's going on is so much bigger than that. But it's just hard to, I mean, it's not hard because you see what the government does and what the media does, but how they've been able to just twist this into what it's become. And I followed it from the beginning and even before that, and to see how things were 2.5 years ago, and now to look at how things are now. I mean, 2.5 years ago, the media wasn't even talking about shit. You know, they were talking about a little about the militarization of police, and they were talking about like what happened, well, that was about 2 years ago, what happened here in Las Vegas when they targeted the police. But before that, you know, they were talking about anti-government groups and stuff like that and whatnot, and how now this is totally about just a racial issue. So they've basically taken an issue that affects, I think, the future of freedom and the lives of everybody, and turned it into strictly a racial issue. And then try to get, so at the same time, they're trying to get people to be against Black Lives Matter, so they'll be on the side of the police. Like it's either or, which it's not. I'm not on the side of Black Lives Matter. I agree with them on some things, if they're, when it comes to the police, but I'm not on the side of the police, of course, at all. I'm on the other side of the police. So, but the media is trying to get people to be on the side of the police. And then in that, create more division, create more white against black. So black against blue, black against white, instead of, and I agree that we all need to join together, but that doesn't include the fucking government or the police. That includes everybody else standing up to government, standing up to the oppression that we're all seeing from government and from the police and politicians. And people forget about politicians, judges, district attorneys, so I always have to mention them because they're all just as guilty and just as culpable as the police are. They're the ones that are passing these laws, trying to control more of your life. Don't forget about all of these agencies on a federal level, the NSA, the FBI. So it's the media is just totally fucking distorting this whole fucking thing. And Black Lives Matter is almost a, not the average person that's just protesting, but any of the leaders of Black Lives Matter or anybody who, I don't know if they're set up and they have a board or whatever, but any of the people that are the organizers or anything like that, any of the leaders, they're just, I wouldn't say they're just as guilty as the government, because they're not, but it may be the media, at least when it comes to this, what's going on here, because they're helping the media in a sense to be able to put this bullshit out there. So, and I know that people are running them as well. So, and that's what happens. It happened with Occupy Wall Street and the Tea Party, any type of movement or organization that gets big, it gets hijacked. And that's what happens. So they're, culpable in fucking with the narrative and not really telling the reality. And then they have a bunch of people that end up, believing this bullshit and follow them. Again, I'm not talking about the average person that goes to the protest. I'm talking about, the people that are out there causing trouble, and some of them are just operatives as well, to make people look bad. As far as the police killed, again, I mean, if you're part of a gang, and they're the gang in blue, and they know exactly what they do, they, of course, I'll go into all the differences that they get compared to when they kill somebody. But, I mean, I don't think that they deserve to die. But at the same time, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. And it's not something that I'm upset about. It's, sad for the kids and whatever. And I don't condone it. I don't think that's the way to go. But I don't, you know, I don't feel bad, because when you're part of a gang, that's, you know, you go in knowing that that may happen. And I'm sure every one of those officers has kidnapped people based on my definition of kidnapping. And I don't think you deserve to die for kidnapping somebody. They don't deserve to die. But not all gang members deserve to die neither. And sometimes it happens just for being part of that gang. So I am a little conflicted, just because it's still a life. And when somebody's killed, that's the end of their life, and you can't go back and change it, or, you know, so that I think it's unfortunate. But at the same time, you know, who knows what they have done. And at the very least, they've kidnapped people and they've covered up for other people. And when I say covered up, it doesn't mean they did something like a cover up. They've seen things that they didn't report for people for. They all have, and they know it. So I don't think they deserve to die. I don't think that's the solution. I do believe in self-defense, but that's not self-defense. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate. And I think that if you don't believe in a lot of the things that the police are doing, I think you should quit. And, you know, I know people need jobs, but that's not the type of job that you keep because you need a job. So there's so many differences that when a cop gets killed and when a person gets killed or murdered by the police. So when the police get killed, of course, they say violence isn't the answer. Of course, it's fine, though, when the police murder somebody, violence, I guess, is the answer. No one prays for the families, no huge press conference. No one comes out and offers condolences to the victims. Usually, I think Obama actually did that in these two shootings that they've been talking about, Castillo and Sterling. The police said there's no place for more violence, unless, of course, it's from the police, right? Police getting killed is a lot of this stuff was said by people. Police getting killed is senseless for normal people. You know, it's not. It's okay. People are tired of police getting away with murder. And you have two incidences of now the police where they were targeted, but, you know, you have like 1,400 people in a year that get killed by the police. And it's like I said, I mean, you get, it's like a huge thing, like the whole, you know, government's under attack or something because of two incidences in how many years. And they got hours and hours of coverage. They got federal agencies to get involved and investigate, state, local, the mayor, the governor came out and spoke. All of this shit when police get killed. And in this investigation, I had mentioned earlier that there was a big violation of rights. I mean, First of all, they took witnesses to an undisclosed location. They wouldn't let them go. I don't know how long they kept them in custody. And these are witnesses. They didn't. These aren't people that did anything. They put the neighborhoods on lockdown. They forced people to stay in their houses, and they. I don't know what they did if you came out, but they essentially locked down whole neighborhoods around that area, and a lot of them. Of course, they blame the Black Lives Matter people, and they blame protesting as to why this happened. They don't blame any of their own actions. You know, they never have. Anytime something happens to the police, they never blame. You know, they want to hide that stuff. They don't want people to find out what they do, because they're saying, well, if people find out, you know, they'll want to do something, they'll get angry, and they don't want people to know. But they're the one. If they don't want that to happen, then fucking don't do it in the first place. So instead of putting the blame where it should go, they just want to blame other people. Also, they ask people to stop protesting for the day. But, you know, when cops are killing people, you know, that's fine. They don't stop doing anything. This is really fucked up. They locked down the hospital because the police were there. Now, remember, there was only 3 police there, I believe. Well, I think there was 4, because one of the officers, I think, did die in the hospital. But they locked down the hospital. If you were going there, they had to check and search your car and verify that you had a real actual hospital emergency. So most of those are all violations of people's rights. You don't have the right to search somebody's car and determine whether it's a real emergency because you have a couple cops in the fucking hospital. Are you serious? They're acting like there's some big, mass fucking gang of people that are attacking the police. And it's such bullshit. And they're the ones that, you know, they talked about how brave the mayor, how brave they were, and how they protected the people. First of all, it was the cops that were being targeted. So I don't know how they were protecting people. And, you know, they're the ones that are doing all these things. Obviously, they're scared from isolated incidents. And they're, you know, locking down hospitals, locking down neighborhoods. So, of course, they still claim that there's the war on cops. And these 2 incidents show that. But there's been a war on cops for years now, supposedly. And if there's a war on cops, and there's not a physical war, if there's a war on cops, it's people don't like them or criticize them or whatever. It's because of their own actions. They keep wanting to blame things on the media or this or that. They don't want to take responsibility for their own actions. They don't. So they had some guy who was walking down the street. He got near them and they tasered him. It's like now they're scared of people getting near them. But shouldn't it be the people that are scared of them? They're killing all these people. And they're the ones who are, I need to see your hands. Well, I want to see your hands because there's a better chance that you're going to kill me. A much better chance. So they want to see your hands, but you can't see their hands. They have their hands on their guns, or they pull their guns out and they point them at you. So, 8 officers get killed in 2 cities, and it's an epidemic, but, 1,400 people a year get killed by the police, and it's not. It's not a problem, the government killing that many people. And again, it's not a huge percentage when you go to interactions. I talked about this before. But that many people being killed by the government is a problem. So Obama had talked about, as I had mentioned, coming together, as well as others. He had talked about, first of all, he's a huge divider himself. And he's trying to advance his agenda, bring the country together. We need to bring the country together. Yeah, we need to bring the people together, not the fucking government and its agents. Because the government, again, are the ones that are oppressing people, that are taking freedom away, that want to control every aspect of your life. And they continue to show that. And of course, again, they want to take people's minds off that by making this into 100% racial issue. When again, there is some racism there, but that's not the major issue. And of course, he did come out and talk about supporting police and government, and we can't let the government and the police divide the people. People need to unite with he wants people to unite with the government. But what I'm saying is, it's the government and the police that are dividing the people right now. And they're using it for that too. That the racism, they're trying to divide people. Because if people united, they'd be in a lot of trouble. And I'm not saying they'd be in a lot of trouble from a, physical harm standpoint, just from, if you had black people and white people and all races getting together to protest the government and the police and start things like non-compliance and not complying with these ridiculous laws that they're passing. And they're going to keep going. But while they're doing that, people are focusing on Black Lives Matter fighting with the police. And now because there's these two incidences, they're saying that now people should stop protesting and stop speaking out against the police. Because if you protest and speak out against the police now, it's your fault if somebody shoots the police or hurts them. That it's not their fault for doing what they do. That's the whole thing. They don't want to take responsibility for anything, and neither does the government, who's hiding behind them, probably is just as scared, because they're like, hey, we don't want people to think about, coming after us like they're coming after the police, because we're the ones who are making these laws, and we're the ones who are coming up with the training and things like that. And as I was saying earlier, the whole thing about solving the problem, or, people saying that, well, we have to have police, instead of looking at the issue and then going backwards and what will resolve this issue. And an example of that I started to mention was drugs. If you legalize drugs, do you know how many police officers and law enforcement agencies and members of law enforcement agencies that you could fucking get rid of right there? Not to mention the amount of crimes you'd eliminate, the amount of people that would be out of jail. Now, yeah, I believe the government would find something else, some other way to go after people, because that's what they do. They want to control people. They want power. But that's why they won't legalize all drugs. One of the reasons, among others. But that is something right there that right away would change things a lot. It would be a huge, I was going to say game changer, but that sounds corny, but it would be. But they're not going to do that, of course. So you look to, and that's what I'm saying, you look to things like that where, okay, what do we need police for? Well, we're not going to need them for anything that have to do with drugs if drugs are legal. And then, you know, really it's about, like I said, protecting people. And there's other ways to do it besides police. And I don't really even think it's the government's responsibility, to be honest. I think it's your personal responsibility. And that's where, if there's a need, there's always going to be businesses that come up, and there's things like the Detroit Threat Management Center, as I had mentioned before, and Dale Brown out in Detroit, who wants to expand that model all over the country. And of course, there would be competition too. There would be other people who would take his model and create their own business. And no one, as I was saying earlier, nobody looks at it that way. Nobody looks at what is the problem and what's the solution. They're looking at the solution, being the police, before they're even looking at the problem. And then, of course, well, if we didn't have police, because they're assuming that you can't have anything else. So, and this war on cops bullshit, again, you're talking about two isolated incidences. Now, if you have one of these once a week, it still wouldn't be as many people as the police kill. But, you know, if it keeps happening and it's, you know, it's in more and more cities, and then maybe I can see a point. But if there's a war on cops, and like I said, it's not a physical war, it's a, you know, being against them, which I wouldn't call a war. Everything's a war to government people, the war on cops. But it's their own doing. It's not the fucking media. The media never... What they don't even realize, they're so fucking stupid. The media reports on everything in their favor, the way they report on it. And they never reported on people that they killed, ever. They only reported on it locally. Until Ferguson, they never reported on it. It's just they got to a point where they couldn't ignore it anymore, because they were going to get called out as just ignoring shit that was too big to ignore. So, but they did it. The cops criticized the media, but the media has always been on the side of the cops, always. And then you have, the politicians that spoke, the governor, the mayor, and the police. So the governor says, you know, there's a team on the ground to ensure the safety of the public, so the public's not in danger. Well, the public wasn't in danger anyway, the police were. So I don't know what the fuck that means. He talked about this is an attack on the fabric of society, an attack on law and order, which is the fabric of society. And yeah, well, when law and order is out of fucking control, you know, then I guess that's what happens. And, you know, no one consented to these bullshit laws anyway. And if you look at, even in that, the first case where the guy did have a gun, first of all, I believe that everybody has a right to own a gun, whether they have been convicted of a crime or not. And that's just what I believe. I don't believe the government can take your rights away while you're in jail, and that's about it. And just because he broke some laws does not give the police the right to execute him. I don't know why they don't get that. But whatever. But them coming up to him in the first place and him asking, like, why are you asking me to get on the ground? When the guy who called even said he didn't call on him. And it's just whatever. But the fabric of society, I guess, is a fabric that we did not pick, that was just pushed on everybody and said, yes, this is the fabric that you will take, and if you don't pay for this fabric at the same time, we're going to extort it from you. And the Louisiana governor also said, there's no division in Louisiana. Like, he speaks for the entire state. I love when politicians think that they speak for the entire state, or the president thinks he speaks for the entire fucking country. And he'll mention, oh yeah, America's with you, or all Americans are with you. And the fuck, it's a bunch of bullshit. Well, I guess if you don't consider yourself part of the country, then it doesn't matter. And he also said that the police ran toward danger to protect the public. They did not run toward danger to protect the public. Now, I don't know if they ran toward danger or not, and neither does he, because he's just going off of whatever they told him. But they didn't go to protect the fucking public, because the public wasn't the ones being shot at. They had even said, the police said that he ignored everybody else. So all the regular people that weren't police, he just ignored them. He didn't shoot at them or target them or anything. So, they contradict themselves through the whole fucking thing. The mayor said that mayors from all over the country are calling to help. And all this stuff for a few police being targeted and killed. But again, it's okay for the police to kill as many people as they want, and that's fine. And violate. See, the other thing is, because there's so many people killed, and I brought this up a lot, that we get away from all the other stuff police do to people, the rights they violate, the people getting beat up, the people getting arrested for crimes they didn't commit, the police just harassing people. All that just gets ignored because, they're killing people, so they don't have time to address all this other stuff. So, of course, their solutions is, deal with better training with racism or whatever, or sensitivity training or some shit, and body cams and everything will be great, which is bullshit. And by going towards just race, they were able to get away from what I was saying, the oppression of people and their rights and all of that, and talking about taking away rights of police and getting rid of the police altogether. And that's why I have the site and the government police, because police, there shouldn't be a group that has those kind of rights that regular people don't have. So, and then of course they're using this they want to move to federalization. They want Hillary Clinton wants national guidelines on the use of force. So to move to federalization. And yeah, national guidelines, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. However, it's a way for the federal government to come up with those guidelines and to start to federalize the police. There was one woman who spoke out, and I have a clip that I will play before we end the show. And she was fired for it, but I think she got rehired. She saw the shooting, and she was a cop in, I I don't know where she was a cop. I'm thinking maybe Cleveland. Nakia Jones. So let me play this clip real quick, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Nakia Jones. My son came home from work today, and he showed me a disturbing video about a young man that was shot and killed by police in Louisiana. And it's so funny because my son wanted to go to college there. And I kept saying, I ain't feeling that or whatever. What's interesting is to me is that the shooting involved a police officer. And I watched the video over and over and over and over and over again so that I wouldn't become judgmental. Because not only am I a mother of 2 African-American sons, and I have African-American nephews, and I have brothers, I'm also a person that wears the uniform with the blue. I'm also the one that gives their lives and puts their lives in danger. I wear blue. So I'm looking at it, and I became so furious and so hurt because it bothers me when I hear people say, y'all police officers this, y'all police officers that, and they put us in this negative category when I'm saying to myself, I'm not that type of police officer. I know officers that are like me that will give their life for other people. So I'm looking at it, and it tore me up because I got to see what you all see. If I wasn't a police officer and I wasn't on the inside, I would be saying, look at this racist stuff. Look at this. And it hurt me. First of all, I became an officer in 1996. I grew up in the hood. So I ain't grew up in the suburbs. I grew up on 93rd in Kansas. We moved to East Cleveland. So I know what it is. So the reason why I became a police officer was to make a difference in people's lives. I knew what it was like to have a parent on drugs. I knew what it was like to watch people be picked on and bullied on and all kinds of things. And I said, I want to make a difference. I want to be that change. So I became that change. So in 96, I took an oath in East Cleveland, sitting in front of Chief Guyton, and said I would serve and protect my community by all costs. Even if it meant I wouldn't go home to my 1-year-old daughter. And that's what I did. And I did it with integrity and respect. The thing that hurt me most of all was that a lot of people that I was arresting were the same color as me, that grew up in East Cleveland like me, so I couldn't understand that. Why would you want to destroy your community? I couldn't understand. I said, okay, but they're not sworn to serve and protect either. They didn't take that oath. This is what they do. So then I left there and I came to another predominantly black community and became a police officer. I'm the first and only African-American female officer, and I can say that pride and respect. I sat in front of Marcia Fudge and took that oath that I would serve and protect my community. And I also moved into my community, and I raised my children in this community. I wear that blue uniform proudly. And I know for a fact I have 6 beautiful children that love me. And I have a husband, and I have a family that loves me. And I know there's times I may not come home from work. I have taken guns off 15, 14, 13-year-old children. I'm talking about real guns. I've had to go and tell a mother that their 13-year-old son or daughter was not coming home. I've interviewed rape victims that's been raped by people that look just like me, the same color as me. We are running around killing each other left and right. But what hurts me the most is the people that stood in front of a judge and stood in front of a mayor and said, I swear my oath that I will serve and protect this community. And God, please forgive me, and you can delete me if you're getting mad at me. If you are white and you working in a black community and you are racist, you need to be ashamed of yourself. You stood up there and took an oath. If this is not where you want to work at, then you need to take your behind somewhere else. I decided to work in the African-American community because I'm African-American and I wanted to make a difference. I could have worked in Parma. I could have worked in Lakewood. I could have worked in North Homestead. I'm a double minority. They would have got 2 hits for me because I'm African-American and I'm a female. I'm here because I wanted to make a difference. But how dare you stand next to me in the same uniform and murder somebody? How dare you? You ought to be ashamed of yourself. So why don't we just keep it real? If you're that officer that know good and well you got a God complex, you're afraid of people that don't look like you, you have no business in that uniform. Take it off. If you're afraid to go and talk to an African-American female or male or a Mexican male or female, because they're not white like you, take the uniform off. You have no business being a police officer. Because there's many of us that would give our life for anybody. And we took this oath and we meant it.
Now, I know she's looking at it more from a racial point of view, where she's looking at, well, they were racist because they killed them and whatever. But I've never actually heard an active duty officer criticize other officers like that. And the fact that she actually did that, I give a lot of credit to her. Now, again, I don't think it's just about, I mean, there are incidences, I think, of racism, but I don't know that that was one of them. I don't know what was going through the officer's head. I do agree with her that it was a murder and that they didn't need to shoot him, but she's definitely passionate, and to hear a cop come out and talk like that is definitely I look at it as a positive thing, and I give her a lot of credit for having the courage to do that. So, well, we'll be back tomorrow with Ken Shorgen. I haven't talked to Ken, but he's scheduled to come on, and he's usually good with that. So as far as I know, Ken will be on tomorrow. So he'll be here to talk about the economy and geopolitics. So I'll see everybody tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.
Comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
And the person that's committing the armed robbery shoots at them, and they shoot back, and they kill them. And I don't have a problem with that. You know, I don't think police should exist, period. However, based on the way things currently are, which is fucked up, I don't think that's an unjust shooting. I think in that situation, the cop has a right to defend themselves and to shoot back. But if you go and look at all of the police shootings, you'll see so many where I looked at 3 or 4 today, where they say that the cop shot a person who had a knife. There was one where they claimed it was a knife, but then it came out later it was a screwdriver, and he threw a screwdriver at them and they shot him for it. So, to be honest, and I have looked at this stuff, like I've said before, I took kind of like a sample size to kind of look at it, and I've been looking the past couple weeks too, to kind of go through. I mean, there's only so many, there's only so much time in the day, but I see the ones I see the most of, to be honest, is ones where the cops claim that a person has a knife or some kind of other weapon besides a gun, something that you have to be a foot away from them to do something. It's usually a knife. But there's been like drills. They killed some kid over a drill, an 18-year-old kid that weighed about 100 pounds that was mentally ill. He had a drill. They killed him over it. 3 cops that could have easily restrained this fucking kid. That had actually went to court. They were charged, but I never heard what happened, and I'm sure they got off. They will sometimes get indicted, but when they do, the DA doesn't want to convict them. The judge, of course, doesn't want them to get convicted. He gives instructions to the jury. First of all, the people that get picked for juries are people that are going to be on the side of the police. It's, you know, you're out. And be sure to check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to all of our Facebook pages and other social media, as well as articles, blogs, and many other cool things. So be sure to check that out. So over the weekend, and I'm trying to actually type something while I'm talking, when I multitask on the air, which I know I should not do, but I'm going to do it anyway. But over the weekend, there was another targeted shooting of police officers. So, at least in this case, it was in Baton Rouge where the one of the killings took place that they were protesting recently. So when they were protesting in Dallas and the police got shot, they were protesting this killing of Alton Sterling and of Philando Castile, who was killed in Minnesota, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And I guess they had gotten warnings that someone was gonna plan a shooting of the Baton Rouge cops. I don't know if I mentioned that. It happened in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where Alton Sterling was killed by the same police. However, we'll get to this later. It's not just, of course, the local police that show up on the scene, nor were the police that killed Alton Sterling any of the ones that were killed. And not that I'm saying that any of this is okay, but if that was the plan there to kill cops in Baton Rouge, it would be a lot more understandable if the actual cops the two cops who had killed Alton Sterling were the ones that were killed, especially if they were the only ones that were killed. It would have at least you could kind of justify it. Not that, just because they had murdered Alton Sterling, and that's, of course, debatable, but I think it's pretty clear. But it would have, I think, with the public in general, looked a lot different, and a lot more people may have, I don't know that they would have supported it, but they would have understood it more, or said, look, hey, you killed somebody and the same thing ended up happening to you type thing. But that is not what had happened. The whole thing has turned into a propaganda mess as far as I see it. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff today, including what the facts that the police are giving. And I don't consider them the facts. I don't not consider them the facts. I just consider them, this is what the police say happened. Is that what really happened? Maybe. Maybe it's mostly what really happened. Maybe it's 80% of what happened. When you gotta think about things like, well, you don't have to. I hate when I tell people to do things. You don't have to do anything, but I suggest that anytime that police talk about really anything, especially things where they have a interest, where it's almost everything really, but where the outcome could affect them in a negative way. And again, when you're a cop, that's almost everything really, because when you're arresting people and bringing them to court, and you're not the actual person bringing them to court, but they end up in court, and you're the one who has to show up and testify and do the investigation, you can lie about whatever you want to lie about, and you may have something against that person. You may just want to close the case. You may think they did it. There's so many different things that I think go into that. So, and in general, government media now is just a bunch of shit. It's so obvious. It's so frustrating to listen to the bullshit that they throw out there. And it makes it hard to feel bad for these cops at all, to be honest. And yeah, I know they have families, and the kids, I guess, are you feel bad for the most. I would think that most people feel bad for the kids the most, because they they didn't have any choice in who their parents were, that their father chose to be a cop. Of course, the wife chose to marry one, and the cop chose to get married and have kids, knowing that, they say their job is so dangerous, but we know that it's not. But when you look at this in perspective of police shootings, it's like, so police were targeted twice. Now it's like the end of the world. There's a war. They were saying this for years. There's a war on cops, and you would think that 500 cops died in the past month or something, or this has happened in 30 or 40 cities. That's the way that they're reacting to it. It's really sickening the way they're treating this. It should be looked at in perspective. You look at how many cops there are. You look at how many cops are killed on a yearly basis, along with the fact of how many people are killed by cops that don't have a gun. And the majority don't have guns. Now, of course, there are situations where they're trying to stop a crime. They show up to, say, an armed robbery or something.
You lost both teams? Get a grip on this operation, Heather. That's bored. Green light, yes, sir.
Sir, I need more time.
We have no time. Are you going to give that order or not?
Sir, please.
You're too naive to see the truth. There's no bringing in Bourne. He has to be put down. And you obviously cannot do what has to be done. I am taking operational control. Asset, you have a green light. Repeat, you have a green light on Bourne.
Copy, guys.
We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member should go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm Dave Bourne, and it is July 19th, 2016, and we're coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen live on Spreaker.com and NonpartisanLibertyForAll.com. Into the archives immediately following this show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, and the next day on Stitcher and iTunes. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and violence. And we, of course, are happy to hear from you via phone or via Skype. The phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or via Skype at Nonpartisan Liberty for all one word. You could send a contact request to the username as well as your name and what you want to talk about.